The Indigo Investigators, Book 3, The Urban Songline. Chapter 1, The Ash of Mount Macedon. The ascent began in a heavy, suffocating silence. Mount Macedon did not welcome the investigators with the cheerful song of the wattlebird or the friendly rustle of the wallaby. Instead, it greeted them with a shroud of grey, bone-chilling mist that tasted of ancient ash and damp granite. To the tourists who frequented the memorial cross at the summit, this was a place of scenic beauty. To the Djidjiwarung and the Woiwurrung, it was a borderland, a high, lonely place where the wind carried the echoes of a world that had been set on fire. Coda tucked his chin into the wiry fur of his chest, his breath coming in short white plumes. Every few steps he would stop, his ears swivelling like radar dishes toward the dense thicket of snow gums. "Baru," Coda whispered, his voice cracking. "The static is back, but it's different here. It doesn't hum like the Loddon. It whistles. It sounds like someone is breathing right down my neck, but when I turn around there's nothing but the fog." Baru stopped. His massive frame was like a dark monolith against the grey woods. His amber eyes began to pulse, a rhythmic glow that pushed back the mist in a 3-foot radius. He looked at the trees, twisted, ancient things that seemed to be leaning away from an invisible force. "You're hearing the spirit wind, Coda," Baru rumbled, his voice deep enough to vibrate the earth. "In the 1840s, the squatters and the mounted police pushed the clans up these slopes. They thought the high country would be a trap. They set fire to the scrub to flush the families out. They wanted to erase the people of the mountain from the ledger of the living. The wind you hear isn't air, it's the sound of 1,000 lungs trying to find oxygen in a forest full of smoke." Bira and Lowena moved to the centre of a natural stone circle. They moved with a practised ritualistic grace. Bira reached into her woven dilly bag and pulled out dried leaves of the silver wattle, while Lowena struck the flint. As the first curl of sweet white smoke rose from the smoking Coolamon, the atmosphere of the mountain shifted. The blackness of the trees seemed to bleed. Slowly, shapes began to form. They looked like figures made of charcoal and moonlight. Warriors holding spears that flickered like static, mothers holding infants wrapped in phantom possum skin cloaks. They stood in the trees, their eyes hollow pits of ancient sorrow. "They are waiting for the permission to leave," Lowena said softly, her eyes shimmering. "They've been guarding this border for nearly 200 years, waiting for the smoke that says the war is over." Baru stepped forward, the wooden cross in his paw glowing. "Ancestors of the high country," he called out, "the fire that chased you is cold, the men who hunted you are dust. We bring the new grace to the old law." As the spirits found their peace, a great masked owl, the ancient protector of the range, swooped low from the canopy. With a silent beat of its wings, it guided the mountain souls upward, their ashen forms turning into pure white light as they vanished into the stars. Chapter 2. The Silent Plains of Kyneton. They descended from the heights of Macedon and trekked toward the rolling plains of Kyneton. On the surface, it was the picture of pastoral peace. Sheep grazed near bluestone farmhouses, and the sun glinted off the winding Campaspe River. But as the bears walked the back roads, the weight of the land began to press down on them. "It's too open," Coda muttered, his eyes darting across the fields. "There's nowhere to hide here. I feel like I'm being watched through a rifle scope." "That's because the memory of the hunt is etched into the soil," Baru explained. He stopped at an old stone fence, the rocks covered in pale green lichen. "Look at these walls, Coda. These stones were pulled from the earth to mark ownership, but to the spirits they are scars. In 1838, the Campaspe Plains were a killing field. The mounted police didn't just move the people along, they scoured the plains. They rode down anyone they found in the open." Baru knelt, pressing his forehead against a large basalt boulder. He could feel it, the frantic heartbeat of the earth. He could see the flashes of the past, the thunder of horse hooves, the crack of black powder, and the desperate flight of families through the tall kangaroo grass. "We aren't just here to witness," Baru whispered. "We are here to intercede." He stood and began to walk through the centre of a massive paddock. As he walked, he began to sing. It wasn't a song in any human language, but a deep, vibrating frequency that seemed to harmonise with the wind. Suddenly, the Mokoi, the restless shadow beings, began to rise from the grass. They were jagged and sharp, their forms distorted by the suddenness of their deaths. They paced the fence lines, unable to cross the boundaries set by the men who had killed them. Baru lifted his arms. "The fences are broken in the spirit," he shouted. "The boundaries of men do not hold the children of the Creator." A radiant golden light began to seep from the ground. The Prince of Peace appeared in the centre of the field, a figure of such immense stillness that even the wind stopped blowing. He walked to the mokoi, touching their jagged edges. As he did, the terror left their faces. They looked back at the prince, and with a collective sigh, they began to fade into the golden light. Chapter 3. The Sorrow of the Werribee River. Southward they marched, following the ley lines of the land until they reached the banks of the Werribee River. The water here was sluggish and dark, choked by the weight of the 1836 conflicts. "The water is heavy with secrets," Coda said, recoiling from the muddy bank. "It smells like old grief." Baru stepped directly into the stream, the water swirling around his powerful legs. "The blood price has been paid," he declared to the shadows beneath the surface. He took a piece of red ochre and marked a submerged stone with the sign of the cross. "The old law and the new grace meet in this current. Flow free!" As if a dam had burst, the water suddenly turned crystal clear. The spirits of the river people rose from the depths, their forms shimmering like sunlight dancing on waves. They were joined by the spirit of the platypus, the ancient guardian of the Werribee. Together they rose in a spiral of water and light, ascending toward the heavens in a beautiful, fluid dance. Chapter 4. The Heart of Naarm. Finally, the wilderness gave way to concrete. The towering glass spires of Melbourne, known to the ancestors as Naarm, rose like artificial mountains. The bears felt the sensory assault, the roar of engines, the scream of sirens, and the frantic energy of a million people who had forgotten the ground beneath their feet. They stood outside the bluestone walls of the old Melbourne Gale. "This is a place of deep shadows," Bira whispered. "The gallows took many warriors here. Tana Minuate and Mulbahina, they were the first to swing." "The concrete has buried the songlines," Coda noted sadly. "But the songlines are not dead," Baru replied. "They are merely sleeping." They walked to the banks of the Birrarung, the Yarra River. As the commuters rushed past, Baru's voice rose in a thunderous chant. "Spirits of Naarm, spirits of the Kulin nation, we acknowledge the concrete that binds you. We acknowledge the gallows that broke you. Tonight the pavement gives way to the truth." The amber glow from Baru's eyes hit the glass skyscrapers, reflecting 1,000 times until the city was bathed in purple light. The streetlights flickered and died. From beneath the asphalt, the ancient spirits of the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people rose. They stood in the intersections, warriors in ochre standing side by side with businessmen. "Mindy, Bunjil!" Baru roared. The rainbow serpent Mindy erupted from the dark waters of the Yarra, her iridescent body coiled around the Eureka Tower and the Arts Centre spire. High above, Bunjil the eagle circled Federation Square. Then a figure appeared on the Prince's Bridge, the Prince of Peace. He reached out his hands, and the trauma of the city, the hangings, the stolen generations, shattered like glass. "The songline is mended," Baru proclaimed. A massive stairway of stars formed, anchored to the Arts Centre spire. The thousands of spirits of Naarm began a grand silent procession into the shimmering gateway of the new earth. As the first light of dawn touched the MCG, the spirits were gone. The city felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from its chest. "The new earth is here," Loana whispered. Baru watched the morning sun reflect off a river that was finally spiritually free. "The journey was long," he said softly, "but the land is finally awake." The Indigo Investigators, Book 3, The Reckoning of Victoria, Chapter 1, The Howl of the Stony Risers. The team travelled west, away from the goldfields and toward the volcanic plains of the Western District. This was the land of the Dawid Wurrung and Jab Wurrung people, a landscape of jagged basalt and deep hidden craters. The wind here didn't just whistle, it howled. "It smells like smoke," Coda whispered, his nose twitching. "But not the good smoke, not Bira's smoke. It smells like old fires, fires that were meant to hide things." Baru stopped the team at the edge of a deep rocky depression. "This is the site of the 1839 Convincing Ground Massacre," Baru said, his voice dropping an octave. "Justice was a lie here. The settlers called it convincing the people to leave. They used whale oil and fire to clear the land. But you cannot burn a soul, Coda." Suddenly, the justice Baru spoke of began to manifest. His amber eyes turned a fierce, burning gold. He struck his staff against the basalt. "I call the unseen witnesses." From the shadows of the rocks, spirits appeared, but they were not huddled or afraid. These spirits were warriors. They held phantom spears made of white light. They didn't want to just pass over, they wanted the truth to be heard. "Tonight," Baru proclaimed, The land speaks what the history books silenced. We offer the justice of the prince, where the hidden is revealed and the broken are vindicated. A shimmering screen of light appeared in the air, playing back the truth of what happened in 1839. As the truth was witnessed by the investigators, the heavy dark energy of the rocks finally shattered. The warriors lowered their spears, and for the first time in 2 centuries, the convincing ground fell silent. Chapter 2. The Court of the Cradle. They moved toward the Grampians. The ancient mountains rose like the spine of a sleeping giant. Here, the team encountered a spiritual blockade. A wall of thick, oily fog prevented them from reaching the sacred rock art sites. The trauma has formed a wall, Bira said, coughing into her paw. It's protecting itself. It's not just trauma, Baru realized. It's a demand for justice. Baru sat in the center of the path and entered a deep trance. In the spirit realm, a court was formed. On one side stood the shadows of the protectors who had failed the people. On the other, the spirits of the Gariwerd clans. There can be no peace without the blood price, a spirit elder declared. Baru stood between them. He didn't offer excuses. He offered the wooden cross. The Prince of Peace was the ultimate witness to your pain, Baru shouted into the fog. He takes the debt of the guilty and gives the inheritance to the innocent. The land is no longer under the law of the gun, but the law of grace. The fog didn't just lift, it exploded into 1,000 rainbows. The spiritual court was adjourned. The debt was settled. The spirits of Gariwerd began a massive dance, a corroboree of light that could be seen by every indigo child in Victoria. Chapter 3, the Melbourne Reckoning. The final leg of the journey took them into the heart of Melbourne. But they didn't go to the river first. They went to the steps of Parliament House. Why here, Baru? Coda asked, looking at the massive stone columns. Because justice needs a decree, Baru replied. As the city lights buzzed around them, Baru stood on the steps. He plunged his staff into the concrete, and the ground began to ripple like water. I decree a new songline over this house. Baru's voice sounded like thunder. The lies are evicted. The silence is broken. The First Nations of this land are the sovereigns of the spirit. A massive golden eagle, Bunjil, perched on the roof of Parliament. From the Yarra River, Mindy the serpent rose so high she touched the moon. The people of Melbourne stopped in their tracks. They couldn't see the bears, but they felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to weep, and then a sudden, overwhelming sense of peace. Chapter 4, the Ascension of the Kulin. Finally, they reached the banks of the Birrarung. The spirits from all over Victoria, from the Loddon, the Campaspe Bay, the Stony Rises and the Grampians had gathered. Thousands of golden souls stood on the water. Is it time? Birra asked, holding the Kulam on high. It is time, Baru said. The Prince of Peace appeared, standing on the water in the centre of the Yarra. He raised his hands, and a bridge of light stretched from the MCG all the way to the Southern Cross. Walk home, Baru commanded. The procession took hours. A line of golden spirits, miles long, walked across the bridge. They carried the stories, the songs, and the culture that the massacres had tried to kill. As they entered the gateway to the new earth, they left behind a land that was finally clear. The sun rose over a different Melbourne. The air felt like honey. The concrete felt like earth. The investigators stood on the bridge watching the last spirit pass. Justice is done, Coda whispered. The land is awake, Baru agreed. And now we rest. The Indigo Investigators, Book 4, The Malay Mirage, Chapter 1, The Dust of Uyen. The transition from the lush, damp forests of the south to the red, windswept heart of the Malay was more than a change in scenery. It was a profound shift in the very soul of the land. As the team's rugged vehicle rattled along the sun-baked tracks toward Uyen, the horizon flattened into a thin, shimmering line where the scorched red earth met the pale, hungry blue of the sky. Coda leaned his head out of the window, his whiskers coated in fine silt. The ground is moving, Baru, he whispered. He wasn't wrong. The red mallee dust was dancing, swirling in tiny willy-willies that seemed to stalk the vehicle like curious, spectral children. But Baru's amber eyes saw the truth within the grit. Inside each miniature cyclone was a spark of memory, a fragment of the Ngarkat and Lachi people who had survived and thrived in this arid wilderness for millennia before the maps were ever drawn. They stopped at the edge of the Uyan Mallee route, a massive gnarled stump standing as a silent monument to the clearing of the land. "They pulled the heart out of the earth here," Baru said, his voice gravelly. "When the soldier settlement schemes began after the Great Wars, they told the men this was a land of opportunity. They didn't tell them they were building their farms over the unmourned graves of 1,000 generations. The mystery begins as Bira lit the smoking Coolamon. The smoke did not rise toward the heavens. It dived. It flowed along the parched ground like heavy water pooling around a specific patch of undisturbed red sand. "Baru," Bira called out, her voice urgent. "The smoke is seeking something. It isn't looking for a spirit. It's looking for an object." They began to dig, their paws moving rhythmically through the warm sand. 6 inches down they found it, a message stick, ancient and black with age, carved with intricate symbols that pulsed with a faint rhythmic light. Baru cradled it. "This shouldn't be here. This is a call to gathering. It was sent out over a century ago, but it never reached its destination. This is why the Malay is restless. A message was intercepted, and a secret was buried." Chapter 2, The Salt Tears of Sea Lake. They pushed further north to Sea Lake, home to the vast, salt-crusted expanse of Lake Tyrrell. This was Boron country, the land of the world's first astronomers. The salt flats acted as a giant celestial mirror, reflecting the heavens so perfectly that walking across the crust felt like treading upon the stars themselves. "This is where the sky world touches the earth world," Loana whispered, her paws crunching on the salt crystals. Baru held the message stick toward the Milky Way. Suddenly the salt beneath them began to glow. The mystery of the stick began to unfold. A vision appeared in the salt glare. In the mid-1800s, as pastoral expansion moved like a plague, a group of elders attempted to hide a spiritual map, a guide to all the hidden waterholes and sacred sites, to keep them from being poisoned or fenced off. "The elders were caught near this lake," Baru explained, his eyes reflecting the constellations. "They buried the stick to protect the map, but because the message was never delivered, the spirits of the Borong have been wandering these flats looking for the path home." Suddenly, a Mokoi of immense size, a shadow formed from the collective grief of the displaced Malay tribes, rose from the center of the salt lake. It was a shifting mass of darkness that began to blot out the stars. "You have no power here," Baru roared, lifting the message stick. "The map is found. The secret is out." He called upon the Prince of Peace, and a pillar of fire descended into the lake. The light searched the shadow, finding the trauma and the missing pieces of the Borong songlines. The salt lake erupted in a symphony of light, and the spirits of the astronomers finally found their way back to the stars. Chapter 3, The Reckoning, Mildura. The final destination was Mildura, where the red sand meets the green lifeblood of the Murray River, known to the ancestors as the Milu. This was the land of the Latji Latji and Nyeri Nyeri. The history here was heavy, weighed down by the massive irrigation schemes that had transformed the desert into a vineyard. "They brought the water," Baru said, standing at the old Mildura homestead, "but they diverted the life. They built a paradise on top of a battlefield." He spoke of the 1841 Rufus River massacre downstream, a war over river rights and survival. The spirits here were the water walkers, spirits denied their connection to the Milu for over a century. The final justice, at sunset, Baru led the team to the riverbank. He placed the message stick into the flowing water. "The message is delivered," he shouted. In the spirit realm, the spiritual map from Sea Lake aligned with the Murray River. Hidden burial sites, sacred birthing trees, and ancient campsites, places the settlers had tried to erase, began to glow through the modern streets of Mildura. "Justice is the truth being seen," Baru proclaimed. He summoned a spiritual tribunal, calling the spirits of the pioneer developers to stand face to face with the Latji Latji elders. "The theft is acknowledged," Baru's voice echoed across the water. "The debt of the land is placed upon the cross. The river is no longer a border, it is a bridge." The Prince of Peace appeared, walking upon the surface of the Murray. He touched the water, and it turned into a liquid rainbow. The anger left the water walkers. The mystery was solved. The land wasn't just waiting for a ceremony, it was waiting for its sovereignty to be recognized in the heavens. Chapter 4, The grand finale. The mission was complete. From the southern forest to the red mallee dust, the songlines of Victoria had been mended. The team stood at the junction of the Murray and the Darling rivers. Spirits from every chapter of their journey appeared, warriors from the Loddon, mothers from the Campaspe, and the astronomers from the Salt Lakes. Thousands of golden souls gathered on the banks. Bunjil the eagle and Mindy the serpent circled overhead in a dance that lasted for hours. A golden light swept across the entire state of Victoria. Every sight of pain and every broken songline was being stitched back together by a thread of pure grace. Baru raised his staff one last time. To the new earth, to the country where the sun never sets, walk on. The Prince of Peace led the way. The golden spirits rose from the red dust of Mildura, flying upward like a cloud of fireflies. They didn't just go to the stars, they became a new part of the atmosphere, a layer of protection and blessing over the land. The investigators sat on the red bank as the sun rose. The message stick was gone, returned to the heart of the earth. The river was quiet and the air was finally still. "We did it, Baru," Barra whispered. "No," Baru said softly, watching the light dance on the water. "The land did it. We were just the witnesses. Victoria is finally free." The Indigo Investigators, Book 5, The Spirits of Lutruwita, Chapter 1, The Crossing to the Island of Mists. The journey across the Bass Strait was not a simple voyage. It was a transition through a curtain of ancient, heavy energy. As the investigator's spiritual vessel cut through the swells, the ocean turned from a bright sapphire to a deep, bruised indigo. The waves here didn't just crash, they seemed to groan with the weight of ages. Coda clutched the railing, his wiry fur matted with salt spray. "The water feels older here, Baru. It doesn't just flow, it pulses like a giant heart beating beneath the floor of the sea." Baru stood at the bow, his massive silhouette framed by the jagged, snow-dusted peaks of the Great Western Tiers rising in the distance. His amber eyes were fixed on the shoreline of Lutruwita, the land the modern world called Tasmania. "That is because this island was never meant to be easily found, Coda. In the old times, during the Great Dreaming, the ancestors possessed a secret that kept the world at bay." "The stones of the hidden path," Baru rumbled, his voice harmonizing with the roar of the engines. "There are legends of sacred stones, birthed from the molten heart of the mountains, that could bend light and wind. They created a shroud, making Australia, and especially this rugged island, invisible to those who did not belong to the songlines. For 40,000 years the shroud held. But when the ghost people arrived with their iron and their cold hearts, the stones were moved, the shroud was torn, and the land of mist was exposed to a world of steel." Chapter 2, The Dreamtime Creation. They made landfall near Devonport, where the air smelled of cold salt and ancient eucalyptus. That night, beneath a sky so crowded with stars it looked like spilled milk, Baru gathered the team around a small fire. He began to draw in the red earth with a glowing finger. "Before we can heal the scars of the Black War," Baru began, "you must understand the birthing of this place. In the beginning there was Monet, the great creator spirit. It was Monet who formed the first man, Tana, out of the very ground we sit upon. But Tana was incomplete. He had no joints in his knees, leaving him unable to sit or rest. He was a creature of constant motion, never knowing peace. It was Monet's brother Dromedine who looked down from the stars with pity," Baru continued. "He descended to earth and gave the people the ability to sit, to dance, and to bend. But a great struggle broke out between the brothers. Monet fell from the sky after a war in the heavens. He crashed into the earth and took the form of the mountains that now dominate this island. His wife followed him, transforming into the sea and wrapping her cold arms around him to soothe his fiery spirit. This island is not just rock and soil, Coda. It is the physical body of a fallen star spirit." Chapter 3, The Tragedy of Cape Grim. The team travelled west to the sheer windswept cliffs of Cape Grim, known to the locals as Kenalk. The wind here was a physical wall, screaming off the Southern Ocean with enough force to knock a grown bear from his feet. This was the site of the 1828 massacre, where the Pirapa people were cornered by those who sought to claim the grazing lands. "The history books use the word dispersed," Baru said, his voice cracking like a whip against the gale. "But the land screams a different truth. They were pushed from these very cliffs into the churning foam below." Bira's smoking Coolamon began to vibrate with a high crystalline frequency. Guided by the sound, they descended into a sea cave at the base of the cliffs. There, tucked in a crevice of basalt, they found the first stone, a black obsidian heart. It did not reflect the light of their torches, it seemed to drink it. "The stone is weeping," Bira whispered. "It was used to hide the people during the hunt, but the violence was too great. The spiritual shroud shattered here." Baru knelt and placed the obsidian against his forehead. He called upon the Prince of Peace, and a bridge of soft white light extended from the cliff edge out into the roaring ocean. "The fall is over," Baru shouted. The spirits of the Pirap arose from the kelp forest, no longer broken, but shimmering like the star spirits of Monet's lineage. They walked the Bridge of Light back to the headland, reclaiming their country. Chapter 4, The Black Line and the Green Jade. They moved into the Midlands, following the phantom path of the Black Line of 1830, a human chain of over 2,000 settlers who attempted to sweep the island clean of its original inhabitants. They tried to net the wind, Coda noted as they pushed through the dense scrub. In the roots of a 1,000-year-old Huon pine they discovered the second stone, a piece of green jade representing the invisibility of the forest. It had been dimmed by the echoes of the hunt, the barking of dogs, and the clinking of chains. Baru performed a ritual of silence, commanding the historical echoes to cease. As he spoke, the forest fell into a supernatural stillness. The Prince of Peace walked through the pines, and everywhere his feet touched, the green stone regained its glow. The spirits who had been hiding for 2 centuries stepped out from the shadows, finally realizing the hunters had long since turned to dust. Chapter 5, The Sorrow of Wybolena. The final chapter took them across the water to Flinders Island, to the ruins of Wybolena, the place of mourning. Here, the survivors of the Black War had been exiled, promised safety but met with sickness and a longing for home that broke their hearts. "This is the deepest wound," Baru said, standing among the crumbling bricks of the old chapel. "When you take a Palawa person away from their mountain, you snap their songline. The mystery here was the missing song of return. The spirits at Wybolena were silent, unable to find the melody that would lead them back across the strait. Baru gathered the black obsidian and the green jade, placing them on the ruins' altar. The stones are the map, he realized. When brought together, they recreate the path Monet walked when he first shaped the world. He summoned a spiritual gale. The wind caught the smoke from the Coolamon, stretching it like a silver cord across the ocean toward the Tasmanian mainland. The Prince of Peace appeared among the graves, his hands raised in a gesture of welcome. "Go home," Baru commanded. The spirits of Wybolena transformed into streaks of golden light, following the smoke cord back to their ancestral peaks. The stones of invisibility hummed, tucking the island of Lutruwita safely back into the protective embrace of the Dreamtime. The investigators sat on the shore of Flinders Island, watching the light fade over the water. "Justice has many faces," Baru said quietly. "Tonight its face is the road leading home." The Indigo Investigators, Book 6, The Ghosts of the Thylacine. Chapter 1, The Shaman of the Shadows. The team moved deep into the tangled ancient rainforests of the Tarkine. The canopy was so dense that day felt like a perpetual twilight, and the ground was a thick emerald sponge of moss and rotting fern. The silence was absolute until it wasn't. A terrifying sound tore through the damp air, a bone-chilling raspy growl that seemed to vibrate out of the very bedrock. Out of the darkness stepped a creature of nightmare, a massive Tasmanian devil. But this was no ordinary animal. His fur was etched with glowing white tribal markings, and around his neck hung a necklace of ancient eagle talons. "You walk loudly in a land of secrets," the devil rasped. His name was Tarkine, a mystical shaman of the Palawa soil. He was a whirlwind of rage and spiritual authority. When a shadow spirit tried to lunge from the undergrowth, Tarkine didn't flinch. He let out a supernatural scream, a sound so piercing it shattered the dark entity into harmless mist. "The ghost people took the skin," Tarkine growled, his eyes burning like hot coals. "They took the trees. They took my brothers. Why should I let you pass?" Baru stepped forward, his amber eyes meeting the shaman's red gaze. "Because we aren't here to take Tarkine, we are here to mend the songline." Tarkine sniffed the air, sensing the Prince of Peace walking beside them, his anger transformed into a fierce protective loyalty. "I can heal the flesh," Tarkine said, touching a wounded wallaby that instantly stood and bounded away. "But only you can heal the memory." Chapter 2, The Last Stripe in the Wild Tarkine led them to a hidden valley, a place so remote the black line of the settlers had never reached its borders. There, huddled in a cave of limestone, was a creature of legend, a thylacine, the Tasmanian tiger. It was skeletal, its iconic stripes faded, its eyes clouded with a century of profound loneliness. It was the final physical anchor of a species the world had declared dead in 1936. "He is the end," Tarkine whispered, his ferocity turning to grief. "When he dies, the song of the tiger vanishes from the earth forever." Baru knelt before the dying beast. "Not tonight." The team formed a circle. Bira and Loana fanned the smoking Coolamon, filling the cave with the scent of mountain pepper and wattle. Tarkin began a rhythmic guttural chant, stamping his feet until the cave floor vibrated. Baru lifted the wooden cross. We call upon the Creator who breathes life into the void. We call for the restoration of the broken kin. As they prayed, the Prince of Peace stepped into the cave. He laid a hand on the tiger's head. Suddenly, the cave floor began to glow. Out of the dreamtime shroud, the spirit of a female thylacine materialized, her stripes shimmering like gold. With a soft touch of the prince's hand, the spiritual became physical. 2 tigers now stood where there was only one, a miracle of old law and new grace. The species was no longer a ghost, it was a promise. Chapter 3, The Drainpipe Tigers of Hobart. The journey took a dramatic turn as Tarkin insisted they visit the outskirts of Hobart before leaving the island. He led them to the industrial edges of the city, where massive concrete drain pipes emptied into the river. "Look with the inner eye," Tarkin commanded. Baru and Coda gasped. Peering out from the dark, cold shadows of the drainage pipes were pairs of glowing, intelligent eyes, dozens of them. The tigers had been there all along, hiding in the belly of the city, surviving in the shadows of a world that thought they were extinct. "They are the refugees of the concrete," Tarkin said with a grim smile. "They wait for the new earth. They wait for the day they can walk the streets without fear." Chapter 4, The Gumleaf Decree. The mission in Tasmania was finished. Tarkin, the devil shaman, chose to join them, his fierce medicine a vital addition to the team. They crossed the Bass Strait once more, but as they travelled, a sense of urgency pulled them back toward their home base. They arrived at their camp in the Bendigo bushland at twilight. But something was wrong. Pinched into the bark of their hut door was a single fresh gum leaf. Baru pulled it down. On the leaf, etched in glowing charcoal, were the words, "Help Broken Hill." "The song lines are calling," again, Baru said, looking toward the red horizon of the desert. "The desert is screaming." Tarkin let out a low, hungry growl of anticipation. "Then we walk. The devil goes with the bear." The Indigo Investigators, Book 7, The Bone White Desert, Chapter 1, The Secret Name of the Purinina. The journey began at the edge of the Murray River, where the red sand of the Mallee meets the lifeblood of the water. Tarkin, the creature the world called a devil, sat apart from the others. He was brooding, his black fur absorbing the relentless midday sun like a void. "The ghost people named me after the enemy," Tarkin rasped, his voice sounding like grinding stones. "They heard my scream in the night and were terrified. They saw my white chest blaze and thought it was the mark of a curse. They called me devil because they could not understand a creature that cleans the earth by eating the death that would otherwise poison the land." Bah. The Indigo Investigators, Book 7, The Bone White Desert, Chapter 1, The Secret Name of the Purinina. The journey began at the edge of the Murray River, where the red sand of the Mallee meets the lifeblood of the water. Tarkin, the creature the world called a devil, sat apart from the others. He was brooding, his black fur absorbing the relentless midday sun like a void. "The ghost people named me after the enemy," Tarkin rasped, his voice sounding like grinding stones. "They heard my scream in the night and were terrified. They saw my white chest blaze and thought it was the mark of a curse. They called me devil because they could not understand a creature that cleans the earth by eating the death that would otherwise poison the land." Baru sat beside him, the great black bear towering over the small, powerful predator. "Names are vessels, Tarkin. If the vessel is cracked, the truth leaks out. But the Creator does not make demons out of flesh and blood." Baru entered a deep trance, his amber eyes glowing until they illuminated the very spiritual DNA of the shaman. In the spirit realm, the name devil dissolved like salt in water. Replacing it was a name of ancient, shimmering light, a name that sounded like the first crack of thunder over a thirsty land. "Your true name," Baru whispered, "is Purinina Kina. It means the guardian of the clean path. You were never a demon. You were the sacred janitor of the bush, the one who ensures that death does not linger. Your scream isn't a curse. It is a warning to the shadows that the light has a fierce protector." Tarkin stood, his white chest mark glowing with a new holy radiance. He wasn't just a traveller anymore, he was a vindicated warrior of the Most High. Chapter 2, The Mounds of the Mallee Fowl. As they pushed north through the Sunraysia, the land became harsher. This was the territory of the mallee fowl, the now, a bird of incredible patience that builds its nest not in the trees but in massive mounds of earth and leaf litter. They found a nesting mound near a place of a forgotten massacre, a dry creek bed where the history of the Lutchi Lutchi had once been silenced. The mallee fowl there were dying. Their mounds were cold and the birds were listless, their feathers dull and grey. "The spirits of the massacre are huddled around the mounds," Vera observed, her fanning of the Coolamon revealing hundreds of shivering shadows. "They are trying to find warmth in the only thing that feels like home, but they are accidentally draining the biological heat from the eggs." Baru led a massive ritual of the sorting. He didn't chase the spirits away, he gave them a new purpose. "Ancestors, do not cling to the earth, climb into the light that the prince has prepared." The Prince of Peace appeared among the stunted mallee trees. He reached into the cold earth of the mounds. As he touched the sand, the natural fermentation of the leaves reignited, and the internal temperature rose to a perfect 33 degrees. The eggs began to pulse with life. The spirits, seeing the prince, let go of the earth and rose as a golden cloud, their sorry business finally complete. The mallee fowl let out a collective booming call, a sound of survival that echoed across the plains. Chapter 3, The Silver Ghosts of the Barrier ranges the road to Broken Hill, was a gauntlet of heat and heavy metal spirits. As the jagged silhouette of the line of load appeared on the horizon, the massive man-made mountain of mining waste, the air grew thick with the smell of lead, zinc and silver. "This land has been hollowed out," Coda said, his whiskers twitching with the metallic tang of the dust. "It feels like a giant with its ribs showing." Broken Hill was a city built on a miracle of ore, but the spiritual cost had been high. The team walked through the living desert where the shadows of the miners who died in the deep shafts wandered aimlessly, their lungs filled with spiritual lead dust. "The silver belongs to the earth," Baru proclaimed, standing atop the massive slag heaps. "When you take the wealth without honouring the giver, the land becomes a cage for the soul." A thick grey fog began to roll in, not of water but of pulverised rock. Inside the fog were the lead spirits, heavy sluggish entities that weighed down the hearts of the townspeople. Tarkin, the guardian of the clean path, stepped forward. He let out his holy scream, not of rage but of purification. The sound wave was physical. It tore through the leaden fog, shattering the grey heaviness. Baru lifted the message stick. "By the blood of the Lamb and the grace of the land, I decree the cleansing of the mines." The Prince of Peace walked into the deepest shafts of the North Mine. Everywhere he stepped, the toxic heavy metal spirits were transformed into harmless crystals of light. The silver ghosts of the fallen miners were released from their subterranean prison, rising through the rock like bubbles in a glass of water. Chapter 4, The Reckoning at Mundi Mundi. They ended their journey at the Mundi Mundi lookout, where the world seems to drop off into infinity. The plains stretched out like a red ocean toward the setting sun. "This is where the desert speaks," Baru said. They performed a final massive ceremony for all the massacres of the Wilia Kali and Barkinji people along the Darling River. As the sun hit the horizon, the entire Mundi Mundi plain turned into a sea of indigo fire. The invisible Australia, the one hidden by the Dreamtime stones, revealed itself. Thousands of Aboriginal warriors appeared on the horizon, their spears held high, their bodies painted in the white clay of victory. "The message stick is fulfilled!" Baru shouted. The team looked back toward Bendigo, hundreds of miles away. They felt the spiritual connection, a bridge of light stretching from the desert to the gum forests. "We go home now," Baru said, his amber eyes reflecting the endless red earth, "but we leave a guard behind." Tarkin stood on the edge of the lookout, his holy markings glowing against the night. He would stay for a time, patrolling the desert, ensuring the clean path remained open for the animals and the spirits alike. The Indigo Investigators, Season 1 Finale, The Red Centre Calling, Chapter 1, The Herald of the Dust, The Journey Back from Broken Hill, was supposed to be a quiet trek toward the familiar gums of Bendigo. Tarkin, the newly vindicated guardian of the clean path, padded silently beside Baru, his white chest blaze glowing like a star in the desert twilight. But the land had other plans. Near the border of the stony desert, a red kangaroo, a massive elder with fur the colour of dried blood, burst from a thicket of mulga scrub. He didn't flee. He skidded to a halt, his chest heaving, his large liquid eyes wide with a terror that went deeper than the fear of a predator. "Turn back, travellers!" The kangaroo gasped, his voice a dry rasp. "The heart is thumping out of time. The great rock is bleeding shadows." Baru stepped forward, his presence calming the trembling animal. "Peace, Elder. We are the investigators. Tell us of the scream in the wind." Chapter 2, The Curse of the Climb. The kangaroo slumped onto the red sand, his tail twitching. "You speak of Ayers Rock, the ghost people's name for the heart, but to the Anangu it is Uluru. For many years the world treated it like a playground. They walked upon the head of the Creator's law. They ignored the Ngapai, the traditional warnings. They took stones as souvenirs, carrying pieces of the law away in their pockets. The Anangu say do not climb. It is a place of Chukurpa. The creation stories that are too heavy for human feet," the kangaroo continued. "But the people climbed anyway. They left their trash, their sweat, and their disrespect. Now the curse of the rock has awakened. Those who took the stones are falling ill. The spirits of the Mala people are restless, and a darkness is leaking from the caves of the Mutichulu waterhole. The land is reclaiming its price." The kangaroo looked at Baru's wooden cross and Tarkine's holy markings. "Even you, Big Bear, should fear that place. It is a furnace of ancient law. If you go, the heat of the ancestors will melt your very soul." Chapter 3, The Vow of the Five-Coater stepped forward, his small paws trembling but his voice steady. "We aren't scared, Elder. We've seen the massacres of the Loddon and the ghosts of the tigers. We don't go to climb, we go to kneel." Baru looked at his team, Coda the Brave, Bira the Keeper of the Smoke, Lawana the Fanner of the Flame, and Tarkine the Guardian of the Path. "The kangaroo speaks the truth of the old law," Baru rumbled. "Uluru is the solar plexus of the world. If it is blocked by the curse of human greed and the stolen stones, the whole of Australia will wither." Tarkine let out a low, vibrating growl. "I was called a devil for 100 years. I know what it is like for a holy thing to be treated with filth. I will go to the rock. I will scream the truth until the shadows break." Baru turned back to the kangaroo. "Tell the desert we are coming. Tell the Anangu that the Prince of Peace walks with the bear. We will return the stolen stones in the spirit, and we will wash the path with the smoke of the new grace. We will not leave the heart of Australia to bleed." Chapter 4, The Long Road North. The kangaroo bowed his head, a single tear tracking through the dust on his cheek. "Then the hope of the Mallee goes with you." With a powerful leap, the herald vanished back into the scrub, heading north to spread the word. The 5 investigators stood together on the edge of the vast open plains. Behind them lay the mended songlines of Victoria and the healed spirits of Tasmania. Ahead of them lay the greatest mystery of all, the deep, red, pulsing centre of the continent. They didn't turn toward Bendigo. Instead, Baru pointed his staff toward the North Star. "Bendigo can wait," he said. "The heart is calling." As they began their long march into the interior, the wind picked up, carrying the faint, rhythmic sound of 1,000 clapsticks coming from the direction of the red centre. The investigators walked into the sunset, 5 small figures against an infinite horizon, ready to face the curse and find the cure. Season 1 conclusion. The songlines are waking.